Welcome to Enlightened, the enlightened journey of life. I am your host, Jen Hamilton, and it is an honor to have you here. I am a conscious life coach and women's empowerment mentor, and I activate a potent level of self and soul inquiry with my clients, which initiates deep and lasting transformation in all areas of their lives. I am here for the full human experience, authentically and audaciously sharing my magic with the world. On this podcast, we're all about mastering life on the way to enlightenment. And as we are here having a human experience, we might as well embrace it all. We play in the space of what is real and tangible, just as much as we play in the space of esoteric and metaphysical. You'll be ignited by deep conversation, whether through my own personal musings, interviews with incredible thought leaders around the world, and everyday divine humans sharing their soulful stories. Thank you for being on this journey. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I'm your host, Jen, and on this episode, I am joined by a beautiful soul sister, Tess Martin. Tess and I had our multiverses collide a few years ago, and it was Tess that I did my cacao facilitation training with. She is the founder and creator of Cacao Mama International and the Cacao Mama Experience. Tess has spent 5 years honing her craft, the Cacao Mama Experience, and facilitating literally thousands of people across the globe, the transformational experiences she personally innovated. Now, over 160 facilitators have become certified through her Facilitation Course. Cacao Mama is a global community of certified facilitators spaced across 5 continents. Tess focuses on mentoring other heart-led visionaries on a mission to create a unique legacy, and they become known for unravelling the conditioning that has them disconnected from their truth. She is on a mission to open the hearts of the world and reconnect humanity with their natural ways. Tess is a mama of 5 beautiful children, 4 Earthside, and a beautiful daughter Poppy who passed at birth. Tess harnesses and alchemizes the potency of mother energy and mama midwife womb power through all her creations, offerings, and truly transformational mentorship. In the nature of the mother, she is deeply grounded through connectivity, community, wisdom keeping, and sharing a refreshing combination of practical and spiritual approaches to life, business, entrepreneurship, and mentoring. In this episode, we touch on some very sensitive areas, and I recommend to have the tissues nearby because it pulls on all of the heartstrings. In full transparency, before we get started, we talk on the subject of child loss, stillbirth, and grief. If you find that you need support following this episode, please reach out to a trusted practitioner to support you and hold space for you, or phone Lifeline in Australia on 13 11 14. It was such an honor to have Tess on the show. So with tissues in hand, let's dive in. Tess Martin, welcome, beautiful human. It is such an honor to have you on the Enlightened Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm so excited about this beautiful conversation today, and I truly am so grateful to have this opportunity and to be here with you. Thank you.
You and I, we've known each other for a little while now, and we collided in each other's stratospheres a couple of years ago through the beautiful plant medicine, cacao, you being the teacher of the facilitation training that I did. I'd love to hear from you. How did you even get into cacao in the first place? I'd love to hear a bit about your journey with that.
Absolutely. So actually, interestingly, this next round of the course that's coming up, I just did my intro video today sharing this story with the group, and most of them said, oh, we had no idea that this is how it started. So I had, about 5 years ago now, I started my personal development journey. I did an online course and went to my very first retreat. And it was in that experience that I realized and had obviously such a visceral experience of just how deeply profound somatic trauma therapy really was. So before that, I had had experience in sort of the Western model of talk therapy and psychology after my daughter passed away 11 and a half years ago. And in that course and one retreat, I felt like I'd had so much more profound healing than I did in those 2 years of talk therapy. And during that retreat and during that experience, I sat my very first cacao ceremony in Bali. And during that ceremony, I remember the moment so well. I remember the sounds and everything I saw, what I was feeling. This booming voice was coming through saying, "You're here to open the hearts of the world. You're here to open the hearts of the world once more." That was it. That was all the guidance I'd received. And I had no idea that that meant I was to be working with cacao. It just struck me, and it struck me in my heart. And I was like, this is the gift that my daughter was to me. This is why I've been through so much of this. It's to reconnect people with the deepest parts of their capacity to love. So I left that retreat, and for 3 months after that, I sat with cacao every single day for 1.5 to 2 hours. It became a non-negotiable. I had 4 little kids under 6 at home at that time, so it wasn't an easy task, but I made it a non-negotiable. And I let her guide me. I did my opening invocations. If for anyone who may have sat a ceremony of mine, I did the opening invocations. I set my intention. I sat with cacao, and then I just listened to what she wanted me to do that day. Sometimes it was dancing. Sometimes it was crying. Sometimes it was a meditation and just sitting in stillness and journaling. It changed, but I just listened for 3 months. Then we packed up our lives. We sold everything we owned, our companies. We folded up the kid's dad, my partner at the time, he folded up pursuing a professional soccer career here in Australia. We sold everything we owned down to 1 carry-on backpack each. And we jumped on a one-way flight to Bali with the 4 kids. And yeah. And during that trip, we actually ended up separating a couple of months in. And it was cacao that I continued to sit with every single day while I returned to myself, realizing that I had lost so much of myself in the ideas and perspectives of these roles as a mother, as a partner. I just become this numb shell of a human who just went about doing what she had to do to keep life moving for everybody else. And it was cacao that brought me back to that place within myself. So after a couple of years,
Wow.
it was cacao. And I find that she has this beautiful way of making herself known to people, finding her way to people she is that initiation. She's that part that's like, I'm here now. It's time for us to do this. And she comes at the perfect moments, of course, the way that those beautiful, beautiful spirits do. So after a few years of facilitating the people that did the online course and the retreat that I mentioned earlier, I ended up becoming a head coach for them and facilitated their online events and retreats. And during those, they knew I'd been sitting with cacao a lot. They're like, would you guide the group through something really simple? So I started doing that. And I started guiding, these participants through that. At the retreats, I'd facilitate, a full ceremony of what I had developed. And over that time, I was gathering qualifications and I was, going into all these modalities from what I'd experienced in the somatic trauma therapy. So it just started snowballing, basically. It started snowballing into, I was just fully surrendered to student mode, to this beautiful medicine, to these beautiful therapies. And I was allowing my intuition to create this beautiful workshop that's now known as the Cacao Mama Experience. So I started, someone nudged me, someone gave me a nudge and said, why don't you facilitate this while you're traveling? Why don't you travel around and facilitate this workshop? It's so powerful. Go in. So I did. And I think that's a beautiful place to start from with that. But that's where it started, was just, I was in Bali, I did an event venue and they said, yes, we'd love to have you. And that was back in the day before Humanitics, before pre-booking tickets. It was showing up at the venue, hoping, it was completely surrendered hope that someone would show up to your ceremony so that you could at least pay for the venue and cover the cost of your cacao. That's where it all started. Then it sort of went from there.
Wow, that's really, really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to dive into different parts of your stories through this. And it's funny because I've been working with cacao for, gosh, I'd say probably about 3 years now, as I think it's coming up to 2 years since I did the training with you. And a friend of mine introduced me to it, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, creating that ceremonial space, knowing that it has such a beautiful effect on the body, and even the fact that it's beyond a superfood, as well. Like it's nourishing us on every single level that we need it. And it's a part of my day every single day as well. It's a part of my offerings with my clients, and hosting ceremonies and retreats. Cacao, I'm the person that brings cacao to anything. So yesterday morning I went for a meditation in a sunflower field. It was just like a meditation and a breath work experience, like in the middle of the sunflowers. Like we were in the rows of the sunflowers. It was so special. And I said to my girlfriend, I'll bring the cacao. And so like we had our sneaky cacao in between the meditation and the breath work. And, when I do like sunrise catch ups with friends, it's always me, I'll bring the cacao. And one of the things that has been, so profound in my journey is that, we're going through a mass awakening at the moment. There's no denying that there is an awakening within humanity at the moment. And I see it as, kind of polarizing, where there's a lot of people in fear at the moment. And I want you to imagine that, say for example, you've like wildly tired and hungover and you're in bed, you've got the covers pulled up, all the blinds are shut, you've got the blackout curtains on, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired, I don't want to get up, I just want to sleep, right? And someone comes like raring through the door, like, wake up. And you just jump out of bed. You're like, what's going on? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They're like, wake up, you have to wake up now, everything's bad. And then you have someone like myself that realizes that you're asleep, will tiptoe into your room, we'll put some cacao on the bedside, put the diffuser on, put some music on, open the blinds very gently. I'll sit on the side of the bed and I'll rock you and be like, hey, wake up. I'm here. I've got you. And like you start opening your eyes and you're like, huh? What? What's going on? And I'm like, I'm here. It's okay. Drink this. It's going to nourish you. So that's how I have worked with cacao and weaved her magic into what I do.
That is possibly the most beautiful description of how cacao holds space and facilitates that gentle opening and awakening of what the truth is in the deepest internal parts of our heart as a human being.
Yeah. Yep. It's that soft, nourishing, motherly hug, euphoric feeling, mind opening, heart opening, warmth that moves through. And it tastes bloody delicious too. I mean, look, I'm not one of these people that drinks it straight with water. When I say it's delicious, I have like a splash of oat milk, and I have a whole heap of like medicinal mushrooms and herbs from Super Feast, and there's a date in there, and there's a little bit of coconut sugar. Like I mean, look, let's still be human about this. Like it's luscious. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, Tess. I was in a grandmother's ceremony, I think it was about 18 months ago, and I saw you in it. And I saw you as a midwife, ushering people through to the new, like birthing the versions of themselves that they're here to be. And I was like, does Tess realize what she does? Like, does Tess realize who she is? And it's so interesting, like when we connected, to have this chat, and I sent you through a form and said, hey, what do you want to chat about on the podcast? And I said, what is your magic and your area of genius? And you even said, facilitate the death of a person's current identity so that they may embrace and actualize the truth of their soul's path in this life. And it's exactly how I see you. Like those words just rippled through me. And even in the ceremony, when I saw you, I'm like, does Tess realize what she does for people and what profound medicine cacao is and what she initiates? Does she understand herself?
Do you know what, Jen? Back then, I don't think I did. And I remember
Mm,
receiving that message from you, and I remember reading it and being like, wow, Jen sees me like this. This powerful woman sees me this way. I was like, and it was a little too much for me to receive at that time. And I think,
mm.
yeah, it's just so, do you know what? Even you reading that back to me about what I wrote on that form, I was like, I don't even remember writing that, but okay.
There you go. There you go. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we all gravitate to each other as we need to and as our souls find each other, and we get to learn so much from each other. And I've taken so much away from working with you and working with cacao, and being able to ripple that out to so many people, to the clients that I work with, the people that come to my retreats and my workshops. And even my sister, she's just recently got onto cacao, and every time she sits in ceremony, she messages me and she's like, I just love cacao. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's
Yes.
such a beautiful thing to have, that we are, brought together by this beautiful medicine. And that is the power of cacao. It is like she connects people. It's bonding over a cacao. And like I said, like I'm the person, like if I'm catching up with people, especially for like a sunrise on the beach or like a meditation in the sunflower fields, like it sounds like I live a pretty exotic life. In between, like all of the other things, I'm just there like on the beach at sunrise and in the sunflower fields and doing life on my terms.
How it gets to be.
Exactly. Exactly. I've decided we're moving house, hopefully in the next few months. I'm like, I want to grow sunflowers. Like that's like my thing. And funnily enough, on one of the screens on my computers, my desktop picture is a field of sunflowers. And so sunflowers are just all around me at the moment. I got to actually take one home yesterday, and this thing is bigger than my head. We got to take a clipping of one because they only had a few days left of their lifespan anyway. And this thing is massive. And my kids came home from school yesterday and they were like, wow, mom, this is the biggest sunflower ever. Like,
Oh, how beautiful to have that in your home.
they were just over the moon to have this sunflower in my house.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's honestly, it is still sitting in a vase in my kitchen sink, leaning against the tap because it's so heavy. I can't find the suitable vessel to hold this heavy, top heavy sunflower up. So I've got to work on that today. So at least I get a few more days out of it. But it's just the most stunning thing. And I got some really gorgeous photos in the field as well.
Beautiful. Oh, so beautiful.
So, Tess, I want to dive into your journey as
Mm.
a mum and all that you've experienced as a mum, because you mentioned earlier that you lost a child. And I would love for you to take us on a journey about what that looked like for you. You're quite a young mum, and you mentioned you've got four kids, but let's just journey there. What happened? Where were you at in life when all of this came about?
Yes. Wow. Okay. Let's rewind the clock a little bit, just a little bit. It's so interesting how these things are such an intrinsic part of our life journey. And I remember a beautiful medicine woman in her own right, Matilda Carroll, said to me once, and this has never left me, it's like etched into me. She said, isn't it interesting how when you go along your journey and you heal, like really deeply heal things, you reflect back and have these moments of like, oh yeah, I lived through that, didn't I? Like I went through that. That happened. And when I am now in this place, 11 and a half years on from when my daughter passed away, to reflect back and be like, far out, I went through that. And at the very young age of 21, so I was only 21 when she passed away. And, in hindsight and looking back at the psychological and emotional maturity of a 20-year-old, and I considered myself quite a mature 21-year-old at the time. So I'd had my other daughter. So I had an oldest, Layla. I became pregnant at 19 and I had her at 20. And when I found out I was pregnant with her, it was this incredible moment of, I'd had this private school upbringing, this private all-girls college. I was going to go on and do medicine or physiotherapy or law or something like that. I got to university, and after 8 months, my soul was screaming at me at, 18, 19 years old. It was like, I can't do this. This is going to kill me. Like, I just have to get out of here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've got to get out. And then about 4 or 5 months later, I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, this is it. It was just whole body lightning bolt. This is my chapter right now. This is what I'm moving into. So I had my eldest daughter, Layla, at 20. And then when she was about 7 months old, I found out I was pregnant again with my beautiful girl, Poppy. Now, I didn't know it was going to be a girl at the time. But I found out when Layla was 7 months old, I was pregnant again. And we were so excited. Like, the gift of being parents at that age, we completely embraced, even though it was to do. This is what I'm here to do. And there was a time after having her saying to somebody, when these things were happening, and I remember I was like, I wonder if, they were signs that something wasn't right. And I was only 21 at the time. I wasn't clicked in, consciously. I was like, I'm like, yeah, now I look back, I don't know, these things, maybe that was a sign. And someone's like, oh, that could have happened to anyone. That, that's it. But to me, I was like, that didn't actually seem normal for pregnancy for me. So now that I look back at it, there were these nudges of like something. It wasn't that something was wrong at those times, but it was almost like a little warning, like a little tap on the shoulder. Something's coming, something's coming. And I remember a really good friend of mine saying to me, again, for anybody in the, intuitive, psychic, spiritually space, like, I was not in that world back then. This was very practical, 3D country town life. But I had a friend say to me when I was about 16 to 18 weeks pregnant, she's like, Tess, I've just got this. And it wasn't even directly toward me, but she said, Tess, I've got this feeling like something really bad's about to happen and I can't put my finger on it. And she's like, I just get this feeling. And she's like, and it gets stronger whenever I'm with you, but I don't know if that's just because you're my best friend, that I like, it just feels stronger. And she's like, I've got no idea what it is, but I just feel like something bad's going to happen. So after that, so I'm just like, it was interesting. It's so interesting to look back now. And I think this was such a beautiful initiation into the deep trust of my intuition at such a young age. There were so many moments throughout that pregnancy where I'm like, this is weird. This is off. This isn't quite right. But everyone around me kept saying, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. That's normal. That can happen. But it wasn't. And these were the nudges. And that in itself, to just have that deep, intrinsic, somatic experience of like, that is your intuition talking. Listen to it. Trust it. Yeah. So I got to 26 weeks pregnant with her. And there was this, a whole day went by. She was a very active baby. And this day went by where I'm like, oh, baby hasn't moved today. That's a bit odd. And I contacted my student midwife at the time and I just said, oh, look, I know this can happen. She said, yeah, around this time, one day, totally normal. Sometimes baby, you don't really feel baby move. And especially at 26 weeks, not a problem. Okay, cool. Second day went past, convinced myself that, okay, maybe I was like, okay, that's a little odd, but, it can happen. I'm only 26 weeks, baby's still really tiny. It's all good. Third day I went into the third day and I was like, I don't know about this. And I started to think back and I'm like, the night before she went absolutely berserk at about 2 or 3 in the morning. Like she just was kicking about and went berserk for a solid hour and then just stopped. And so I got to that third day, contacted my student midwife, and she said, give the hospital a call. So I gave them a call, and the midwife was like, no, everything will be fine. This is normal. Your baby's really small, see things, from your first, just totally talk to me. And I was like, okay, yep, they're the experts. They know. So I let it go. That night, baby started moving again. And it was a big sigh of relief for me. It was like, oh, thank God. I can feel hands moving. I can feel feet moving. Baby's okay. So again, that thing of like, oh, they were right. Everything was fine. What am I worried about? I went in for an ultrasound at 33 weeks. Again, another beautiful, all of the threads and pieces. I had to go and I chose to have another checkup at that time because in one of my earlier ones, my placenta was really low lying. And at that time it was over my cervix. And they said, you can't actually birth through your placenta. If it's over your cervix, and we'll see that it's moved out of the way. Now the placenta was totally out of the way. What they found at 33 weeks was that my daughter's brain was completely full of fluid. The part that was functioning still was her brainstem. Now, when I say still functioning in that after birth, we could have done, I'll explain this in a moment, but at that point in time, we were told that and this was just at our local hospital, we hadn't even been to the specialists yet. They said, with that amount of brain damage, her quality of life was completely unknown, let alone her survival. So we went off to the specialists and they asked me if I'd noticed anything. And I told them about that night where she just went absolutely berserk inside of me and then 3 days of no movement. And they said, look, by the looks of it and by the looks of their scans, where her cerebral fluid in her brain was blocked was this tiny little valve that only takes about 1 or 2 red blood cells to block it. And they said, we believe she's had a stroke in utero and she's had a tiny bleed on her brain, and that was enough to block the valve. So in that process, we were given our options, and they said to us that with how extensive that damage was to her brain, they said, we actually believe the pressure of that during birth is actually going to cause her heart to stop beating. So I went into labor. We decided and under their guidance, we were advised to be induced at about 35 weeks because her head was already the size of a full-term baby. And they said, we don't want to leave you to go all the way through and you not be able to birth her. So that's what we chose. We chose to be induced, and during the labor, her heart stopped beating. So it was not long after they'd actually ruptured my membranes, her heart stopped beating. So I don't think I can fully capture knowing that, and this was very early in labor as well, but knowing that you're about to go through this entire process and there's no heartbeat on the other side. There isn't going to be that breath. And going into that with the hope, and then had hope so early on completely eradicated that she would make it through. And they just said her heart isn't beating. There's no pulse. So my body froze up in that moment, and the emotional and psychological stress of that moment meant that my labor just halted. I was still having contractions, but nothing was happening. My cervix wasn't dilating anymore, but they had the monitors on me, and they're like, they said, look, this is going to take a long time. And they said, these contractions are strong, but your cervix is not doing anything. So they gave me a few options at that time. And I ended up choosing to have an epidural. Now, every one of my other births, completely natural, completely uninterrupted, no drugs, no inductions, nothing. So this was the complete opposite experience. But for me, I was in a place of such gut-wrenching grief while going through this labor and trying to birth my baby. And again now, I'm like, at the time I was like, age means nothing. I'm like, no, I was so young. I was so young in that moment. And so I chose to have the epidural because I was like, I want this, as awful as this whole situation is, if there's one thing I can bring to it, is that I wanted peace. I wanted to bring her into this world with peace. I didn't want to be going through that. And from every part of my being to just remember that agony, I wanted to bring peace. And I can articulate that now. Back then I wouldn't have been able to articulate that, but I could feel it. So I opted for the epidural. And after that, we went from this room where I was roaring into the bed, and I had nurses and midwives and doctors and lights and machinery and beeping and chaos, absolute chaos. The anesthetist I got was an absolute piece of work. Let's just put it that way. She was rude and gruff, and she like shoved me about, and she was not gentle, and she had to have a couple of goes to get the epidural in, and it was just it was just chaos. But the minute that epidural kicked in and I laid down, everybody left the room but one midwife and her dad. They turned down all the lights and everything just went quiet. And I lay there and I fell asleep on the bed. And I had a self-paced, clicky epidural thing. So anytime I felt like it, I could push a button, it'd give me a bit more pain relief. So I fell asleep for about 3 hours. And in my sleep, I pushed the button and the midwife was in the room and she came over to me and she said, love, you've been asleep for a while, but you've just pushed the button in this sleep. So I'm wondering if you're feeling something. Can I have a look? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, of course. So she lifted up the sheet and she's like, she said, love, your baby's crowned. Would you like to bring it into the world? And I was like, oh my God. So we, woke up the kid's dad had fallen asleep in a chair. So we woke him up and he came over and the midwife said to me, okay. And she said, well, baby's here. So as soon as you're ready, let's bring baby out. And I pushed possibly as hard as what it would take to do a wee on the toilet. Like I just gave this little push. Yep, that was about it. I gave this little push and she said, okay, beautiful, baby's head's here. And she said, one more little push and we're going to have baby. And I just tiniest little push. And she lifted her up straight onto my chest. And I've got goosebumps everywhere. And it was the most beautiful, peaceful moment I think I've ever experienced in my life. Nothing can prepare you for a baby, a full-grown baby that, you go into that space waiting for the cry, waiting for the breath, waiting to see the weird, jolty newborn movements. And they pull this baby out. Well, I pushed her out, didn't pull her, sorry, but baby comes out and there's nothing can prepare you for what that looks like. Just that lifelessness in the body. And yet when they moved her up onto my chest and I just lay there and held her and closed my eyes and everything in the room went black. I closed them for a second and felt her and I opened them to check everybody and the room, this little white light lifted up out of her heart, a small piece of it tucked in behind mine and just clear as day, she said, Mum, you've got to take me back. And so I lay there holding her and I said, I don't want to. And she said, no, but trust me, you need to take me back. You have to be the one to do it. So I was like, okay, I'll go with you. Looking at the room beneath me, I could see myself holding her all the way to the edge. and I handed her back. So as I started to come back down, it was like this beautiful moment of connection where I dropped back into my body, and this beautiful doctor walked into the room, and she walked over and gave her this kiss and stroked her and just said, "Welcome, beautiful little angel." And we just had this moment. We just had this moment looking at each other. And I realized right then and there that experience to me felt like breathing. It was so natural. And at the same time, it completely, it cracked open every seed that I'd ever planted about what I thought the gift of life was. And I knew then, just coming in this world for me to raise her as being here as a child, to raise her, and that she had a profound purpose in what we had just been through. So, from that moment on as well, speaking to anybody about my experience, I remember having serenity and peace about me whenever I spoke about her. I cried, obviously, but that moment in taking her all the way to the edge and handing her back across that threshold was as if in a complete instant, every single thing I'd ever thought or known about the perspective of life was just obliterated in the best ways I could ever have asked for. And I think, for me, that was my grandmother medicine moment. I've never actually sat with grandmother medicine, and yet that was my moment with that. It was the complete undoing of what this fabricated reality has us believing in and what the illusions all hold us to. And she broke that open for me in that moment. And every mother I've spoken to who, because, obviously after that, for quite a while, there were a few people that would gravitate into my space, but it wasn't until I started on my own journey that these women just started coming in. Women who had full-term stillborn babies, and each and every one of them have said that the experience of birthing death was the most profoundly serene, beautiful initiation into the depths of what our purpose and life truly is, the privilege, honor, and gift that life is. That it's something that none of them, as much as they, and this might be quite challenging for some people to hear, but none of them have ever said, they said, I understand why it happened and I would never take it back. It's what was meant to happen. It was the gift that soul was supposed to be. And as much as they would love to have their child, they see and understand so deeply what that was here to do for them, but to do in this world in so many different ways that they would never have comprehended before.
Wow. Wow. I'm honoring you so deeply right now, sister, as a mother, as a woman, as a friend, as a facilitator in this space, as a speaker in this space, because it is not easy to get on and share your story, to go to essentially relive it through this experience. And I honor you for bringing so much light forward and the journey that you have been on throughout these years. How do you even, once it's all done, like once there's got to be a time where you hand her over and then you get off the hospital bed and then you shower, and then eventually you leave the hospital. Like, what is life while still trying to make sense of this whole experience and replaying everything over in your head? I'm assuming it's all consuming for you. How do you exist in that?
I think your very idea of what it is to exist just is gone. I think and at the same time, it's all you can do is just exist. There are times where the very thought of getting up to face the world is just incomprehensible. And so when I'll backtrack to what you sort of said then about getting up to shower. And for anybody listening who has obviously given birth before, and that first shower after birth, when you that moment when you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the first poo is the scariest thing you'll ever do, and the first shower is the most blissful thing you'll ever have.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so true. It's like it is. It's like this luxurious spa experience that you're just immersed in. But I think after having Poppy, so obviously I'd had the epidural, so I actually couldn't walk for quite a few hours after having her. And look, our hospital experience, that's probably that could be a whole other podcast, but our hospital experience was very interesting after having her. I talked about the chaos in the room before, but also there was almost this feeling of like the staff didn't know what to do. And I'm like, they'd had people come in and give birth, they had been there for that sort of thing before. But this had this entirely different energy to it. It was like no one knew what to do, and things just weren't working, and people just couldn't kind of get their stuff together for a minute. Like what I would say was, until that moment where I talked before about the room just going peaceful and just that one midwife and everyone cleared out, that was beautiful. She really dropped into the space and she was in it with me. Before that was just the quality of care was awful. And then afterward as well, we were kind of just put back down into this little back room that was tucked away from everything. And, after having Poppy, like there was the meconium and stuff. She was just wrapped up in these blankets loosely. There was meconium all down her leg. They'd put her onto this like bag of ice. So now they have proper cribs, thank God. And I really hope that part of my action and my, activism towards that kind of sparked it a little bit. But, then the water was soaking through her blankets. So it was making her wet and it was just awful. So we didn't really have a great hospital experience, actually, which is a whole other part to it. But what I was getting to with the shower part in all of that was that that beautiful, blissful shower, I don't think I've ever had a faster shower in my life. I didn't want to be away from her. I knew that and I think, again, we have those moments in life when somebody profoundly close and special to us leaves, and it gives us this glimpse, this taste of just how fragile and finite this experience can be. And the stuff that we carry that really is, so funny sometimes in the grand scheme of life. There's stuff that we worry about and that we carry and that we allow to burden us and hold us down. I think knowing so deep, like just knowing that this was all going to be over and I would never get to hold her or see her again in about 24 to 36 hours time, this was going to be done. Now, at that time, we had no idea that we were allowed to take her home, that we could actually have a couple of days. All of that sort of, like, none of that was shared with us. There was no support for us and what was actually available to us in this process. So we thought that we, in our completely innocent and ignorant thinking, and we were like, okay, so, we're allowed to stay in hospital for 2 days. So I guess we've got to go straight from there to the funeral. Like, we were thinking it was like illegal to take her home. So we organized that. We had because of, obviously finding out before having her for a couple of weeks, we were advised to go and plan her funeral, go and have that ready to go, have that set up, because afterward, you don't want to be consumed in that. So we had that ready to go. So knowing that I had maybe 24 hours with her, I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to shower. I had to go to the toilet. I didn't want to. Like, every part of me just wanted to stay as connected to her as I possibly could. And everything else could wait. Everything else could wait. And stepping out of that room and into the world and just seeing people go on with life was probably the most bizarre experience of sitting back and simply observing humanity, observing people, observing where we've got to, observing the imposed structures and systems and ways of life that have people so disconnected from the deepest parts of their heart and to each other, and just sitting back and watching that go past me. I was like, how have we got here? How did this happen? How did we lose the very essence and connection with life, the fragility of this experience, the finite nature of every single time our foot gets to hit the ground beneath us? It could all be over in a split second. And these people, watching these people go past, worrying about what was, perceptively just the most ridiculous things. And I wanted to go around shaking people, being like, do you not fucking understand? Do you not actually understand that this beautiful child next to you who's screaming at you in the supermarket trolley for a hug, this could be the last chance you get? What if this is the last chance you get? Just give them a goddamn hug. You don't know what's going to happen when you walk out of this store. And it was like being in a medicine journey, watching things happen around you and just not being able to contemplate or comprehend how societal conditioning had got us to such a place of disconnect. And I couldn't, it took a very long time to integrate with that again. Years and years to be able to integrate with that again and not feel so disheartened at the way that society was. Yeah.
I feel you deeply with that. When I had my ex-partner's father pass away, and death it just lands you in your humanness, in life, and in, as you said, the fragility of life. And I remember after he passed, and after he had left the house, and me and my partner and his brother were like, let's just go out for lunch, we're starving. And just exactly what you said, people watching, people existing in life, having no clue. And I guess one of the biggest gifts that death provides us with is the awareness of life itself.
Yes.
And just how precious it is and how fragile it is, and reminds us over and over and over again when we either go back into our experience of it, or we're presented with it, whether we're prepared for it or not. Sudden death happens all of the time, but when we're presented with death, it just brings this, profound awareness of life itself. Yes. And what a gift that is. At the same time, the suffering that comes along with that as well. It's all of the pieces, isn't it? It's all parts. And for me, like losing friends, I've had, a friend lose a child at the age of 2. All of these things, it slams you back into your body, into your life, into your awareness of just how precious life is. And we ask ourselves the questions, if you want to get into self-awareness, like be around death.
Yes.
Like you ask yourself, why am I doing these things that don't actually matter? Like, what am I truly here for? Why are we here? What is this? What is the point of this? And I think it's, death is one of those most unknown things. We don't know when it's going to happen to ourselves and to our loved ones. And it's not something we can ever stop. And there's no way we can sidestep the feelings and the emotions that come with us.
Yes.
Yet our relationship, especially in the Western world, with death is quite skewed, because it's like we are so frightened of it. And when we're presented with it, it just catapults us into this whole different experience. Whereas it's also a beautiful invitation for awareness to come home to ourselves often, to check in with ourselves often, to be grateful for the children that argue, because they're there arguing in front of us.
Yes.
Because they're still here with breath in their lungs. And I think it's important to have these conversations. I think it's so beautiful that you're here, Tess, sharing your story. And for the people listening to this, no doubt you've experienced some tears through this conversation, as we both have. But let's wake up to the fact that, what are we here doing in life if we're not enjoying it, if we're not experiencing it, if we're too focused on stress or work or the things that aren't the embodiment of our joy and our happiness and our pleasure, then what is the fucking point?
Yes, exactly. And even then, when I mentioned about, that giving that example of the mother in the supermarket with the screaming child in the trolley or whatever, I think it gifts you that perspective, not from a place of fear, but from that place of gratitude. And like you said, it's because I feel like that's a different conversation to be talking about walking through life in fear of death, rather than being completely aware and being so openly embracing of the fact that this thing is imminent, and yet it is our greatest gift to be here now. And what is it that we're creating with that? And they are completely different ways of receiving life, of walking through life, of being with life and what happens. And I think the idea of being in our greatest joy and happiness as well is not that everything in life will always go well and it will just be this beautiful, happy experience, but welcoming and embracing what life has to give you, knowing that every single step and every single piece of that is here to take you closer to, especially again, because with that awareness of this is all going to be over soon and I'm being guided in this way, and this might feel so goddamn uncomfortable right now, and this is really challenging because there's more of life that wants to move through me and with me, and who am I to do such a disservice to myself, to my family, to the people around me, to this world, if I am so inherently aware of just how precious this experience is and how miraculous it is that I'm even here. If I block, step away from, or stop what life is trying to allow me to receive right now, however that looks.
Yeah. I love how passionate you are about this too, because there's no right and wrong way to do grief, and this could have, everybody experiences grief and, stillbirth differently, and everyone's journey essentially is perfect for them and where they're at in their journey of life. And I love that you've been able to, I guess, harness the magic of it and work with it, as opposed to living in the fear of it and the shadow and the depths of it. No doubt you went there, but you've move through it with light, you know, and no doubt you've had, you know, some tumultuous times. I want to ask you, Tess, what was life like then going, you know, back home to Layla and then going on to have more children and, you know, 3 more pregnancies? Like, what was that like for you?
Mm. That was, I think there are a few pieces to this, because obviously, like you said, you know, going home to Layla and life having to continue, and then going on to the 3 more children that came after that, and then also just last year, my beautiful partner and I were expecting a baby and losing that baby early on, and my experience of that, having had this experience with Poppy as well. So going back to, you know, after her funeral and then coming home, and I actually have told Layla this quite a lot. And, you know, some people could argue that, you know, what this might do for her hearing this messaging, but I am so ineffably grateful for the fact that I had her through that time, because every single day I had to get out of bed no matter how I felt. I had to get out of bed and do my best to show up for her and to look after her and care for her. And I remember I think it was about a week, maybe 10 days afterward, Poppy's dad's parents gifted us a week away to just go and have some space. And I remember Layla was really sick the whole time. So she didn't sleep. She was having trouble eating. She was miserable. It was just this, I was like, wow, I'm here with these engorged boobs that are just full of milk, because there's no baby there to feed. And I'm still bleeding, and I'm, wearing with Poppy, again, all these little things, but, I had some pelvic instability and stuff like that. So I was wearing like these support shorts with these big boobs that were just fucking aching, and and this sick child and all this in amongst it all. And in all of that, I had to keep getting up every single day. And that was, told Layla this before, that to me, she is such a gift, not just for that, and not to place the responsibility on her for being, that kind of emotional scapegoat, I suppose. But I was so grateful that she was there, because it meant I had something to get up for. And in those darkest moments when, because it's something that I think also probably not shared a lot or enough, the whole postpartum experience. But it's like your body, your heart, your mind, your spirit, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? I'm going through this. Where's the baby? Like, it's like your body is searching for that baby. And it is such a confusing time, in that, like I said, like your body doesn't know what to do. In your mind, you're trying to process and comprehend what's just happened. You're in the midst of this profound grief. And then there's this little human who still needs breakfast at 6:30 every morning. And there's this little human who still needs a nappy changed. And, they still require some level of their parent. And it wasn't easy. It was a really challenging time in those days when, hormones were going absolutely berserk. And in the midst of that grief, when we look at the bond between mother and baby, when a baby is born and those floods of oxytocin happen and you connect with your baby and the baby feeds, and, all that profound experience between mother and baby on such an inexplicable level is gone. And your body is searching for that. And every part of you is searching for that. And it doesn't have it. And it's such an it is such a traumatic experience on a very deep primal level. And this is, just proven. I'm actually not just blurting this out. Like, on a very deep primal level, it is an extremely traumatic experience to have such disconnect in that moment. And I noticed the way that that affected my presence with Layla, almost like this fear of intimacy with her, because if I truly allowed myself that place of joy and intimacy and depth with her, it could be taken away at any moment. And on the paradoxical, complete polarity and flip side of that was this profound gratitude for the fact that she was here and she was healthy and she was thriving, and I was in such awe of her and the gift, the fact that I got to be her mother and that I got to be her guardian and her carer in this life. And I was entrusted by her beautiful little soul to guide her through this life into becoming this flourishing, thriving being who's going to contribute something to humanity. And trying to find your place in those two extreme ends of this spectrum was, like I said, possibly one of the most confusing places to try and navigate. And again, without so much as, a whole lot of adulthood and life experience behind me either. It was a really weird time. And that's why I said, I'm like, talk about a medicine trip. Like, it was happening in real time for weeks on end. And it's like, I can't just come out of the trip. I can't just come out of the journey. Mm. I think that was an extremely deep forging of resilience, of facilitation and space holding of life. I had to stay with it, and I couldn't get out of it or away from it. I had to be in it for as long as it took.
I feel like I'm in an ayahuasca journey, just having the visuals of you going through this and all that's come with it. Like, I feel like, I'm in a journey right now. Tess, how, as a 21-year-old, I mean, you speak with so much wisdom now.
Yeah.
And obviously this is 11 and a half years down the track. Did you have this level of wisdom now? And where did that come from at such a young age? I was only getting into meditation and like Doreen Virtue cards at 21, and I thought I was woke as fuck, right? And I had no clue about the world. Where did that come from for you? What was essentially your preparation in life that gave you this level of stability and wisdom and grace, by the sounds of it, the way you move through it, even through, the polarity, the darkness, the grief, and all of that?
I think this is a very, I've reflected on this really quite often from this place now, and being like, wow, how different the experience of that would be if it were to happen now compared to that age at 21. Where most of my friends were in their second year of uni, blackout drunk in the middle of corridors and just making sure they could buy 2-minute noodles that week. I was going through this. So I felt very actually alone and isolated in a lot of ways. I felt I've never felt like, we hear this all. I'm like, I never really did feel like I fit in. I still remember as a 4-year-old child watching the world around me going, what are these adults doing? How did we get here? Like, I remember really vividly especially with my, sitting in my living room, watching my parents do stuff. And I was like, why does that matter? Like, what are you doing? What are we doing? This is not how it's meant to be. Like, what's happened to humanity? And I remember thinking that as a child. And it didn't make any sense to me. The world didn't really make sense to me. And my mum always said to me, she was like, she said, you were the easiest kid. She was like, you just kind of had yourself and just did your own thing and you were good. And I've always sort of been told that I've just got this, I suppose, maturity. And I'm like, I don't actually know where that comes from. Having said that, in this experience though, there were moments that I reflect back on and I was like, wow, age and maturity, like really, like there is actually something to be said for age and maturity and emotional maturity, which sounds so obvious when you say it. But again, beautiful hindsight. I look back to that and I was like, there were days where I remember one in particular, and this may be quite triggering for some people to listen to, but so a little context, after I'd had my next daughter, Evie, so 2.5 months after having Poppy, I found out I was pregnant again. So in less than a year, I had Poppy and then Evie. And that's a whole other thing in itself. But after having Evie so even if we look at a really practical physical level, hormonally, psychologically, in terms of my mental health, my emotional health, I was not ready to have another baby yet. Not really. If I, could bring that awareness to it, I was like, wow. And yet Evie chose to come at that time because she was the catalyst into me actually seeking really deep healing. She was the catalyst into me being like, to actually being able to admit to myself, I am not okay and I need help. Going back to our hospital experience, after we left hospital, there was no ongoing support whatsoever. We were just like sent home and are like, yep, you'll get an in-home checkup to make sure you're okay. That was it. We didn't know any different. Like I didn't know any different. I was like, okay, this must just be how it is. There was no there was no psychological follow-ups or support. There was no the connection. The hospital had informed my GP that I'd, had her, and he wrote me a beautiful card, but there was no continuity of care program put into place. There was just nothing. So a year on, after having Evie, there was no support. There was no healing that had even started or taken place. And after having Evie, there was this one day I remember, so again, these moments that just fucking grip you. There was this one afternoon, I was standing in the kitchen. Evie was an incredibly unsettled baby, no surprises throughout my pregnancy, obviously. I was really anxious. I had such a hard time connecting with her out of fear. That I'd lose her, what if I lose her too? I loved her with every part of me, but let's just keep a little safe distance here, because what if something happens to her too? Would I actually survive that? That was how my internal headspace was. So after having Evie, she was an extremely unsettled baby. The birth was good, but my placenta was retained. So she had about an hour and a half with me. But then I had to head down to theatre to have my placenta removed, and she was without me for nearly 5 hours after birth. So she was a very unsettled baby. She just screamed all the time. And I had this about 5 or 6 weeks after having her. We're in the kitchen and I was holding her. It had been a whole day of baby wearing and screaming and feeding. And I asked Layla to go get her clothes so we could get our pajamas on, and she threw her singlet up onto the side of the sink, not even in the sink, just on the side of it into a puddle of water. And I remember grabbing it going, "What are you doing? What is wrong with you?" And her little face just dropped and my heart completely cracked open and I fell in a ball of tears. And I looked at her and she had these little tears rolling down her face. And I was like, I need help. I need help. I can't do this. And so when you say, how did you go on through life with such joy and peace? I'm like, the way that you embody, live and breathe such profound serenity and peace with life is by meeting some of the deepest darknesses within yourself, the deepest fucking depths of darkness that moment doesn't even sound that dark, but there were days where I would curl up in bed with this screaming baby and this toddler who just wanted her mum back, and I would just bawl my eyes out because I just couldn't cope, and I wanted to end all of it. I wanted to end all of it. Very convinced that these two little girls were so much better off without me here. That they would be so much happier without me causing them so much pain all the time. So I had to dig my way out of that darkness to be able to walk my days with light. It came and it went in moments, but it was nothing like it was now. And I felt such deep I remember going through moments of feeling actually such deep regret for having brought them onto this earth and putting them through that. And I had to face off with that. I had to actually be willing to not ignore it, to not be like, well, this is just how it is, so we'll just do it. It was actually like, they didn't choose to be here. They did, yes, but I chose to have them. And if I've chosen to have them, I have to be willing to face off with horrendous darknesses within myself to create in this world.
Tess, this is something I feel you so deeply on, having a similar experience postpartum, especially after my daughter, my eldest, and she'll be 9 in October. And just that sense of loneliness. There wasn't much follow up after I had her. There was like, I'll go see your child health nurse at the pharmacy. I mean, they were like dinosaurs anyway, like their information and their support felt really outdated. My first pregnancy that I had before my daughter was an ectopic pregnancy. And I remember I was actually at the doctor's surgery a week after I'd found out I was pregnant, just from just a normal pee on the stick pregnancy test. And so I'd gone into the doctor's the day that I found out that I was pregnant for a blood test, and I was going in for my follow-up appointment to get like the hospital referral and all of that stuff. And I keeled over in the most intense pain of my entire life, worse than childbirth. And my doctor straight away called an ambulance, and I was at the hospital then needing emergency surgery for this ruptured ectopic. And I remember going in prior to surgery for an ultrasound, and they basically just said, we can't, there's no heartbeat and there's a lot of blood. We don't even know what side it's on. We don't know where it is because there was so much internal bleeding. And they basically just said, oh, look, she's going to need emergency surgery and a social worker, basically. And all I got was a pamphlet for, I think it was Beyond Blue or one of those, and we'll send a fax to your doctor, and then to navigate that, like I was a little bit older, so I was I think about 26 at the time. Still, looking back, so immature. Like we're in that maiden phase of our life. We don't have the maturity that we have throughout our motherhood experience, especially when it's the first time, to have to deal with a loss of any type, have to deal with the whirlwind of emotions. I most certainly, was not in the personal development space, awake or anything like that back then. However, my partner and I found our own way to navigate that for ourselves. But because we didn't have external support, I didn't have people to lean on that had been through loss that I could have been guided by. We had to come to our own conclusions as to why this happened to us, especially when it was only, 6 or 7 months prior we lost his father. and so we just thought, oh, a baby's, they always say that a baby comes through after you lose someone and this is the best thing ever. And you go from such a high to the depths of the lows and having to navigate that within yourself. And I think there is so much of a gap in our, I'll say this term lightly, healthcare system, because I truly don't believe it's there for health. That's a different podcast. Our pharmaceutical system. Um, but there is such a gap there that is needed for the support of women. And I know that, as we awaken in this journey of life, we're finding sisterhood again. We're finding community. We're finding collaboration with women, and we're finding each other. And we have, the things like podcasts weren't around back then, we have these platforms in the ways that we can connect and listen and absorb information and find each other and be like, there you are, you're a shining light for me. I want to connect with you. Or, I was the same. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends that had been through, birth. I didn't, have a lot of, friends with babies around me. And I had a lot of people, send flowers and, feel for me. And that was beautiful. It was beautiful to be held. But the level of support that women need in any part of their motherhood journey, whether it is through loss and through grief, or whether it's, they go full term with birth and they have a baby and then they're transitioning from maiden to mother. And the grief that I experienced as a new mother, mourning the loss of the version that I once was before having a baby, and my old life and my old body and my old relationship and my old job, like all of the things, like nobody tells you about that. And I didn't have a solid support system around me. There was nothing, from the hospital. I didn't even, like, with my first, gosh, we should just do a podcast episode on birthing experiences.
Yeah, we really should.
Because I went through the hospital system. So, and I went, super medical. So I had a obstetrician as opposed to just a midwife. It was, there was so much intervention that there shouldn't have been. And I was none the wiser. I wasn't in the space of understanding conscious birthing. It was just far too hippie for me. It's like, no, I need to be in the hospital as long as possible and have all the help. And, what do I do? And I need the obstetrician on call, and I need to have all of the appointments and all of the ultrasounds and all of the checkups and, like that. And I honor myself, the version that I was back then. And it's a very different experience for me now. And I know that there has been so many women that have gone through this transitional motherhood journey that have just felt so alone and so empty and so just defeated at times through motherhood, because we don't have the communities that we used to have. We don't have the support. We don't have the women that come together and everyone gets involved as a community. And, back in my day, giving birth to babies, their dad had 2 weeks off work and then was back to full-time work. We didn't have, a lot of money in the bank where we could be like, okay, take 3 months or 6 months off. There was no there's nothing more than 2 weeks for, dad leave. And I remember even when our son was born, 2 years after our daughter, my son actually came 12 days earlier than expected. And he texted his boss in the morning to say, oh my gosh, we've got this baby. I won't be in, we've got this baby. And he's a cabinet maker, and his boss like literally rang him and said, can you just come in and do a kitchen today? And he's like, we've just had a baby. Like, no, I'm not coming in. But there was this expectation for him to still show up at work. And, it was such a lonely journey, through motherhood, and it's coming out the other side now, knowing what I know. And as you mentioned before, being an advocate and being an activist, for, making some noise for what it is that is needed in this world. And I think it's so important. And this is why I love having a podcast as well, because we get to have unfiltered conversations on this platform. And we get to be a voice for the experiences that we have, in hopes that we can support and inspire other women that are either on this journey or have been through this journey, and say, hey, sister, I've been here with you. I'm sorry for what you went through, and please know that you're not alone. Because there's nothing worse as a mother. It's that loneliness feeling. And especially when you are exhausted, your boobs hurt, your body doesn't function the way it used to. Things feel like they're going to fall out, and your pants don't fit, and your boobs leak everywhere, and you lose your shit at this innocent child because you are just at the end of your tether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this has so much to say for when we look at the medicalization of birth. There is so much here to speak to sovereignty. And in order to create that sovereignty for ourselves, it truly requires an incredible connection to community, and that stating of community, and that wisdom, that guidance, that support when we're in an ecosystem like that is, these beautiful young women in their maidenhood transitioning into the mother, a elderhood. They're surrounded by these older, or these women, these old, presumably older women, who have that deeply grounded embodiment of that mother, who can sit by their side as they roar their baby into this world and hold their hand and say, like, I am here. I'm going to be here on this journey, this initiation, this transition with you. And then we've got these beautiful crone women in the community, in the tribe, in the however it is, and you mentioned maternal child health nurses being dinosaurs, but I'm like, if there is such wisdom in that, but if we could just take it out of the indoctrination, that would be great.
Yes, exactly.
Grown women there. Yeah, to bring that nurturing, like, these women who are so deeply in that embodiment of the mother, and have been through that, to be there in those initial phases, and couple that with, the crone is, she's done the child rearing. They're now having their own babies, and she's there for that. But she's got the space, the capacity, the wisdom to just nurture, nourish, and be present. And it creates this whole feminine symbiosis and this connection that we are just so taken away from now. We have like pop midwifery psychology that we absorb through our screens. But like, where's the woman sitting in front of us who can put her hands on our shoulders and just give them a rub and be like, I know this is hard right now, and I'm here. And again, to bring ourselves to that place is such a radical jump away from, like I said, the medicalization of birth, the systems that are in place, the conditioning that we get brought through. Birth is the most natural thing in this world. And yes, things go wrong. Sometimes there's complications. And I read, actually, you'll probably love this, I read this great quote once, and at the end of it, it said, read that again, was this midwife who had gone from, she was actually a private midwife initially, and then went into the hospital system. And she'd said to this woman once, the woman writing it, she'd said to her, she's like, it's so interesting. I never experienced fetal death until I came into the hospital system. And the woman looked at her and was like, you what? And she said, I'd never experienced fetal death until I came into the hospital system. And at the bottom of that caption was like, read that again. And I just, again, this could be a whole other podcast, but that level of support and that foundational, it's that foundational trust within the space of family and womanhood. I still think there's a lot to say within the online space around like the curation and creation of that from a very artificial place as well. It's easy to spew out this stuff and this information, but when it actually comes to the trenches of life and those people around you, how much are you truly unconditionally there for them and those women in that support?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll leave that
so
there.
true. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel a follow-up podcast episode coming on about this experience. And I think we need to talk about this. It is conversation that needs to be brought forward. And I also think it's an invitation to continue to do the work on ourselves, to, really go back and heal the parts of us that felt so broken and so alone, through that transitional period of, maidenhood to motherhood, to meet ourselves with such love and kindness for the versions of ourselves that we existed at that no longer exist in the versions that we are now, but we have to honor the person that we were then. We can't beat ourselves up for who we were and what we did with all that we had and all that we knew. We have to meet ourselves there, and that comes through doing the work. It comes through knowing our values, just doing the simple foundational work of self-love and self-nurturing and honoring our journey and honoring ourselves and respecting ourselves. And this is why I'm so passionate about the work that I do, whether it's through coaching or hypnotherapy or holding space for women. It's allowing ourselves to come home to ourselves and say, this is what was real for me. I'm truly in touch with how I feel about this experience. And through that, and through community and through connection and through sisterhood, we can come together and we decide if activism is the way we want to go. And we want to roar really, really loudly around something where, there was injustice, or we have a wound, or we have a trauma, or there was just something that just doesn't align with what we're bringing forward in this world, then that's okay. And this is why like I said, this is why we do this work, or we make peace with it, or we support other women to find their voice through it. And it's about bringing safety to all of this as well. It's about finally allowing ourselves as women to have a voice and truly have a place in this world and rise together. This is the rise of the divine feminine. It is through our voice, and it is through our awareness and our conscious decisions to say, what once served me or served the collective is no longer in alignment anymore, and I'm allowing it to fall away. And that is so prominent in the birthing experience. Because if something doesn't align, if the hospital experience doesn't align, we have to honor that. So when I had my son, it was a completely different experience, because at the time, like, I'd chosen to step away. I'd felt really unsupported by going through like an obstetrician, and I wanted to go through a midwife program. And it really helped rewrite my story on my birthing experience, because being surrounded by midwives was such a different experience to going to a clinical environment anytime. I didn't even go to the hospital until it was time to give birth. And when it was time to give birth, I went to the hospital. I went straight to birthing suite. I was in the pool. So I arrived at 3:15 in the morning. I was in the pool by 3:25. He was birthed, I think, at 4:30, and we were out the door back home by 11 a.m. And the only holdup was that we had to wait for the hearing test to come in. And so we weren't even on the ward. So we went straight home, to my daughter and to my mum that had come over. And I had that experience of being able to birth differently. I wasn't induced. I was able to, have a water birth, have, only the gas. I didn't have any of the other things that I was offered previously. And it helped me rewrite my story and move through a lot of the trauma that I experienced through birthing my daughter. And at the time of, especially with my daughter the first time around, I didn't know that there was any other way. I didn't know, I didn't even know that, having an epidural meant that, I wouldn't feel the contractions. Like I knew I wouldn't have pain, but they were basically saying, oh, we think you're having a contraction push. I mean, if anyone knows anything about pelvic organs and what you're doing when you're pushing hard and there's no baby to like help move its way down, it can get really messy. And so, but just not having this awareness and completely surrendering and handing over all trust to these professionals that are saying, do this, do that, and oh, we think this and we think that at the time. It's like, oh, we think you're having a contraction, perhaps you should push. And me going, okay, well, you're the one that knows what you're doing. And then, finding out, many years later through the awakening journey that hang on a second, there is a different way. I'm an advocate now for women standing in their power and just bringing into awareness how much they choose to have of the awareness within their birthing experience anyway, because there is a fucking lot of information out there. Like it is ridiculous. But at the same time, we are so lucky to have that information, and we're so lucky to have, there's really well-known people on Instagram that share their story, and the wild birthing programs that you can do, and all sorts of things. Like there's so much support out there. You just have to be open to receiving it if that's the space that you're in. But do you know what, as well, I really just want to honor the women that say that is not for me and I want the full medical experience and hand it all over, or I want to book in for the cesarean because I refuse to have a vaginal birth. Do you know what? I honor you in that as well, because if that is your decision from your heart, that's perfect.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's you standing in your sovereignty, in your decision, in your power as a mother, as a woman, as a human, to say, this is my choice. This is how I'm going to bring my baby into the world, because I feel that this is what is best for me and what is best for them. So I don't want to just make it about, let's just honor the hippies that, that do the wild birthing, right? Let's honor everyone on their journey for whichever path they choose to take, because as honoring the fact that you're empowered in that decision, or if things don't go the way you had planned, perhaps you wanted to have a natural or a wild birth. If things don't go your way and you need medical intervention, as much as, Tess and I have both had experiences where it hasn't been the best experience, we're also very blessed in a first world country to have access to medical support as we have needed it. And, we do have access to, doctors, theatre, hospitals at our fingertips essentially as well. So I don't want to take away from the incredible work that is done as well, and the support that is there for the people that need it. But I'm also honoring the fact that there is a gap as well. There is that support that's needed, and that information which we can find when we allow ourselves to. And I think, circulating back to what I was saying before, and this is why I'm so passionate about women doing the work, is to have the strength to go back and either heal through any, trauma experiences they've had, or I don't know about you, Tess, but through my own personal development journey, spiritual awakening, all of that kind of stuff, knowing what I know now, feeling a little disheartened for the versions of myself that didn't know any better at the time and could have had a different experience, but also meeting myself with such love and kindness and compassion for actually just not knowing any different at the time.
Absolutely. And I think that's, before speaking into sovereignty and the medicalization of birth, and then the support afterward that I was, speaking into, is regardless of where and how your birthing experience unfolds. That doesn't negate you from that support afterwards. So I just wanted to make that really clear as well, that what you just said then is wholeheartedly everything that I stand for, and is also the work that I'm here to do as well. That, you know, what I said to you in that in what I sent to you about what is it that you do, it's, if you in the deepest part of your core are able to sit there and be like, I have deeply thought about, contemplated, felt into all of the options that are available for me, and this is what I know right now in this moment with this, you know, that this version of me that's present now, this is what I know is right for me. This is the right choice for me now. And you're making that decision from such an incredibly empowered place. That is the right decision for you in that moment. And that's what everybody deserves.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tess, I feel like I could talk to you for days and weeks about all of this. And
We could.
I just want to take a moment again to just honor you for the incredible woman that you are, the absolute powerhouse that you are as a mother, and just deeply honoring the journey that you've been on that has brought you to where you are today, and the incredible work that you do and the experience that you bring to so many people through this medicine of cacao, through your daughter Poppy, and through having the courage to use your voice through all of this as well. I'm so deeply
Thank
grateful
you.
that our worlds have collided, and that we are sisters on this journey of life, and that we can, you know, come together through conversation and share this magic with whoever's been blessed to listen to this. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you for opening this beautiful space for these conversations, creating such a beautiful experience where, you know, these true depths and these intimacies of life can be shared, for this wisdom to be passed on. And if this is the medium in which we're able to get this into the hearts, the ears, the homes of the beautiful souls who listen, then like that is such a gift and such a privilege in itself. And I too am so incredibly grateful that our paths have crossed. And I know we've talked about this before, that it's only the very beginnings and inceptions of possibility. And I'm extremely grateful for your time and your presence today in us having this very powerful conversation.
It is my absolute pleasure. We will link to the show notes, obviously, so people can contact you directly. We will link to the Cacao Mama Facebook and Instagram page. And for anyone out there that wants to go through the facilitation of cacao process with Tess, I cannot recommend her highly enough. The beautiful love and support that she births with this medicine and brings forward and holds this most beautiful container for learning, it's second to none. It was such a blessing to go through this journey with Tess, and you know, so many people that I've said, you know, I've recommended Tess to say, hey, this is the person that you want to take you on this journey. So we'll link to all of that in the show notes. Before we wrap up, Tess, I have one question for you, and I feel this is going to be a big one. To you, what is the meaning of life?
The meaning of, for me personally, and for how I currently in this space allow ourselves the unfurling, the undoing, into a place and a space where we are able to fully embrace everything it can gift us, and allow ourselves to find profound purpose, however that looks to us within that journey. So for me, it's about opening ourselves up to being able to experience this life in the fullest capacity and potential that is sitting there in front of you, and allowing that to be.
I love that. And it is all right there and in front of us. We just have to choose to open our eyes to see it and reach out and grab it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, beautiful Jen.
Thank you so much, sister. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlighten podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.